So now we just need a quorum.
That's the most important part.
Yeah. I'm always the most punctual, this group.
So, Mike, are you gonna show, be controlling the presentation? Or-
No.
Okay.
Unless you need me to.
No, I just asking if we want to throw up the agenda now.
Yeah, that's fine by me. Either you or Larry, whoever was best to control the presentation.
Larry, I can put up the agenda and some of the other things, and we can turn it over to you when it gets to the presentation.
Yeah, I was going to say, given the slowness of my bandwidth, we thought it made sense for Tina to host the
Okay.
actual presentation.
I see Tina just joined, so that's good.
Yeah.
Yep, I just joined and I can hear you now. Yes, let me know when you're ready for me to share my screen. I can do it.
Okay, so I think that Mike would need to let me have it now for the agenda.
I'm just going to put it on all panelists can share. It should be all set now.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yes. Hey, Lynn, that's not the updated agenda.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I guess I don't have a copy of the updated one then. I can get it. was trying to download it from the town website, and I haven't been able to do that yet.
All right.
Here we go. I got it.
Got it.
Yep. Well,
All right, just doing one more scan through the room. Looks like we have a quorum present. Making sure we've got everybody that's in. Looks like we do.
did the new one come up on the screen?
Scroll down, I'll be able to tell you.
Looks like it.
Yep. All right. Well, if you're ready to go, then we can get started. You all set, Lynn?
Yes.
Okay, look, I'll just gotta go through my normal rigmarole. Legalese. All right, so welcome everyone to the meeting of the Medfield Dale Street School. I'll call the meeting to order tonight. We do have a quorum present, and pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, general law, chapter 30, section 8, chapter 30A, section 18, and the governor's March 15th order, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Medfield Dale Street School Building Committee is being conducted by remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen or view this meeting while in progress may do so following the instructions on the agenda and meeting notice. So with that, just a reminder to all that are in attendance that the meeting is being recorded. And that there will be an opportunity for public input after we review the presentation and go through some other miscellaneous administrative actions. It looks like we have 24 active members of the public that are listening in so far, and we will get through those when we get through the presentation. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Lynn, to start the meeting.
Okay, good evening, everyone. A couple things that we need to do to get started. In your meeting packet, you should have seen the August 12th, 2020 meeting minutes. We're asking for a vote to approve those meeting minutes. We have someone that would like.
What was that, Leo?
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion from Leo Brem and a second from Jeff Marsden. And we will need to do a roll call. So bear with me here. I'm trying to get my list of participants here. Anime O'Shea Brooks,
Yes.
Mike Marcucci,
Yes.
Walt Kincaid,
Yes.
Tim Bonfatti,
Yes.
Mike Weber.
Yes.
Sorry, bear with me. Scrolling through, Leo Brem,
Aye.
Jeff Marsden,
Yes.
and Mike Quinlan also votes yes. Did I miss anybody?
Herb.
Oh, Tom, sorry about that, Tom.
No
Without your
problem.
video
Yes.
on,
Yes.
you're down at the bottom of the list. All right. Thanks, Tom.
So we've been working on the preferred schematic report, and as a consequence, we have been developing a little bit further the cost estimates that we reviewed at the August 12th SBC meeting. We've also further developed the site evaluation matrix and compiled all the responses that we received into average scores. All of these things will be shown on the presentation that Larry will start. Larry, do you want to go ahead and take over the screen and start the presentation?
Yes, Lynn, I will take over.
Tina, I'm sorry, yes.
No worries. Let me
Sure.
see. Should I be able to just hit my share screen?
Yes.
Well, you do
Okay.
that, Tina. I'll just say greetings, everyone. Just for the record, I'm Larry Spang from Arrow Street. And we're pleased to have been working with you guys for a while on the different configurations that we'll see shortly of the Dale Street School. We've put together a presentation that tries to summarize, and we'll run through it quickly, much of the information that has been previously presented, but we know tonight is sort of a milestone meeting of a discussion about trying to narrow in a preferred site and a preferred scheme. So we want to run through it quickly just so it becomes front of mind for everybody again, and then allow plenty of time for discussion, including plenty of time for the public to weigh in with questions and or comments. And what we'll do is we'll go back and forth a little bit. Tina's going to control the screen. And then between Tina and myself and Lynn Stapleton of Left Field will be making different presentation parts of it. So Tina, if you want to advance to slide 1. And here's the things we wanted to go through to, again, bring you up to speed and as well as summarize work to date. We did want to talk about the school committee vote for those who may not have followed that a couple of weeks ago. Talk quickly about some updated site and environmental information that Tina will give you a summary of. Review the cost estimates. Really, they're about where they were previously. We've done a few tweaks to those, but more or less in a similar place they were when we last spoke about them. Lynn is then going to walk through, as she mentioned, the criteria matrix, which all of you were good enough to give us your input, and they have been able to put those together in a sort of summary fashion. A little bit of a question, number 6 and number 7, how we got here, a list of all the various meetings and other things, as well as timeline looking ahead, just so everybody understands it. And then we'll do a very quick pass at the design alternatives, and I promise I won't get lost in those. But again, to bring them to top of mind for folks. So with that, we can advance to the next. And I think this is essentially a kind of a one-liner, just so everybody understands where it is. And maybe, Mike, we should pause there and see if there's any discussion amongst the committee members. I think everybody kind of knew about it.
I don't know if anybody had any questions. I did send out an update to everyone that the school committee did vote unanimously to support the grade 4 and 5 school configuration. I don't know, Anna May, if you wanted to say anything, but or if there be any questions.
The vote was unanimous, and I know it was not the direction we were originally planning on going into. However, the timing, it seemed like the right thing to do. So we feel good about this decision.
Mike, could I ask, it doesn't relate to this, but could we move the design alternatives up before the criteria just so that, you know, so that we see them all before we see all just the nomenclature around them?
Sure, you okay with that, Larry?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. No, we had gone back and forth a little bit, Tim, on the order, and so we're happy. We'll just skip ahead to that and then come back to the criteria matrix. That's easy to do.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Then Tina was going to walk you through a little bit, just the quick overview of the site and environmental information.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. This is a one slide that goes through several of the due diligence items that we've been looking at since the start of this project. And this is just a quick run through of the various things that we do look at in terms of site and environmental. In terms of geotechnical, that was discussed early on in terms of what the soil conditions are, foundation, and so forth. Preliminary traffic, we also discuss utility infrastructure. There is, in July, it was determined that there may be a need to replace the main water pipe on Elm Street if a new school was to be built on the Wheelock site. The next three, geo-environmental phase 1, geo-environmental phase 2, and the limited hazardous materials survey, those are more recent. On the next slide, I'll go through in a little bit of detail, but just to summarize the findings from those. Next is the site survey. So that will be happening once a decision has been made on which site, whether it's the Dale or Wheelock. And then the site surveyors will proceed with that work to be completed as part of the PSR submission to the MSBA. And two more items that we looked at carefully, knowing that both the Dale and the Wheelock site has an aquifer protection district overlay, and that basically means that there would be a special permit by the zoning, there would be site plan review by the Board of Health and the Planning Board, just to make sure that stormwater is captured correctly, and also in terms of the aquifer and the wellhead protection, making sure that certain storage of, liquids and gas and chemicals are properly stored and are also limited to certain types. And then finally, the archaeological district, there is an overlay on the Wheelock site, and this would happen during SD should the site be selected, where we would submit a project notification to the Mass Historical Commission, and basically some research would happen to see what needs to be, if there is anything there, and if it needs to be protected. Any questions on this slide? Okay. And then I will go through geo-environmental and HAZMAT. This is the most recent information that was actually gathered about 3 weeks ago. These are reports that were done through a consultant, peer consultants. This is for both the Dale Street school site as well as the Wheelock school site. In terms of phase 1 environmental, that is almost like a desktop research and observations to find out if there are any environmental, whether it's hazards or suspicion of any environmental conditions that needs to be made aware of. For Dale Street, there were 2 known recognized environmental conditions, short for REC, and 1 suspect REC. The 2 known ones were really in the basement. There's some chemicals, cleaning chemicals, and it looks like there might have been just some spills on the ground, so there were some stains. So that just needs to be known so that it can be cleaned up properly. The second known wreck is near the boiler. It looks like there might have been some oil that had spilled onto the concrete with some stains. So to be aware that that also would need to be removed and cleaned up properly should this building be renovated. And then there's one suspect wreck, which basically there was a permit to have an oil tank removed, but no additional information was found that confirmed it was removed, which just means that we will need to confirm it usually through a radar detection that would see if there is an anomaly underground, and if there is, then further investigation can be done so that it can be removed if there is something underground. And then in terms of WELOC, I'll just switch over to this side here for phase 1 and go through the 3 wrecks that were found. The 2 suspect wrecks are basically there was a vent pipe that looked like a ground water monitor. The cap was rusted, so they couldn't open it and verify what was there. So if that was to be the site of construction, then further investigation would be done, and if necessary, it would be removed. The second suspect wreck is that there was a record of another oil tank that was supposed to be removed, again, to confirm that it has been removed and a new one hadn't been replaced. So just further investigation would have to be done for that. And then lastly, the one historical wreck showed that there was a gas spill somewhere between 50 to 100 gallons that was supposedly cleaned up, and there was record of it being cleaned up. Again, to just confirm to make sure there isn't any additional cleanup that would be required. And then in terms of the phase 2 limited subsurface soil investigation, that is where they actually take some soil samples and they take it to a lab and they try to detect if there were any VOCs and other chemicals, metals, pesticides, herbicides. And what they found was that there was actually either none or very little that were detected, and it did not exceed the Massachusetts regulations. So therefore, it's basically a clean site. As with either site, if either one of these sites gets chosen, standard and best practice is as they dig, they will take samples and do some additional testing, only because these were limited samples in 4 locations around the site. But this gives us a good idea of that there is basically a clean site. The last thing we did was at the Dale Street School with the existing building was a limited hazardous material survey. Every 3 years, the school is required to do an update on their asbestos survey. And this is in addition to that, so it's not, it doesn't use that information from the 3-year report. However, this is to verify in addition to it. And so 203 samples were collected. Asbestos is present in the building. There's also non-friable asbestos is what they had tested and found. Non-friable, for those who aren't sure what that means, is typically it's in tile, it's intact, it's not loose, it's not where someone could pick it up. The opposite is friable asbestos, and that's where it crumbles and it could become airborne. And that is identified in the 3-year report. It's in the basement, but that's not in the public area. It's not where the kids are or the staff are, and that is something that if it's left alone, it can remain. And also in terms of the hazardous material, that does have to be abated if we decide to renovate the existing building. Any questions about this? Okay.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think just to think about it is we took for 4 soil samples on each site, as Tina mentioned, and
Mhm.
our soil samples are, you know, a 3-inch or so boring, and we didn't find any issues there. We wouldn't expect to see any based on the phase 1 report, which is really, as Tina mentioned, the due diligence piece, but you never know what you're going to find these days. So just everybody should keep that in mind as we go forward. But in general, I think these are clean sites. Maybe what we should do is now go to the options or the schemes that we showed. To Tim's point, show those first and then come back on the cost.
That's fine with me.
Okay. And again, while Tina gets that prepped up, oh, I think it's on page 24 or so.
Oh, sorry. Yep. I actually need to escape from my presentation. There we go.
Thanks.
Design alternatives.
So again, we have not done a lot of development of this since we last spoke to you folks in August, and really since we developed these for pricing. These are the 11 schemes essentially that have been studied in detail for both sites and both grade configurations, as well as the alternative A up in the upper right hand corner, which is the code repair base repair scheme that the MSBA requires us to do. Really says if you were to fix your existing building and otherwise not do anything else, that would be your scheme. But on the Dale Street site, we looked at adding to the existing building, do an add reno scheme for both the 4.5 and the 3.45. We looked at 2 new construction alternate schemes, both for those, as well as then the new scheme at Wheelock in 2 configurations. And we can then jump to the next, just again to kind of give everybody a mental picture of the work that was done. This is the 4.5 add reno to Dale Street, so you can see the existing building and the proposed new classroom wing and new cafeteria and gymnasium wing. In all instances, when we were looking at the 3.45, we essentially put an additional floor on the classroom wing. In the end, it worked out. I don't know as it was necessarily intentional because we looked at a couple of different approaches for some of them, but fundamentally, given site constraints and the way the building wants to lay out, it sort of worked out to say that there was three floors versus 2 floors for the 2 schemes. So again, we did develop the plans, and we're not going to walk people through the plans. This was the new build scheme, trying to put the building in between the existing Dale Street and the Memorial building so that we could build a new building there as a 2-story version and then a 3-story version for 3 through 5. And again, looking quickly at the Dale Street, a second option, and depending on which scheme we decide to do, we will be continuing to do things further along as we go to further develop these schemes. So this is not the be-all, end-all for these schemes. Going then to the Wheelock site, you can see here the new build for the grade 4.5 configuration, essentially behind the building in a new configuration. Essentially, one thing we did talk about last time we met was that we are spending some money to reconfigure the existing parking and drop-off areas in front of the Wheelock building. So there is some money being allocated for that effort in the 2 schemes and costs that we'll go through shortly. And then the 3-story scheme for the grade 3 through 5, again, with the new build behind Wheelock. We also looked at a second option of bringing the building forward and creating a little bit more of a shared courtyard between the 2 buildings. This being the 2 grade configuration, and trying to develop a little more sort of direct connection between the two buildings. It had some pluses and minuses, which we can go through if folks want to talk about that in detail. But again, a three-story for the 3-grade configuration. And I think now, Tina, if you go back to the dollars. Okay. Thanks. And again, numbers that have were pretty much consistent with what was presented previously. There were some slight tweaks as we sort of pushed and pulled with our estimators. 2 sets of numbers here: design, bid, build, procurement, as it's known as, on the left side. That's again for folks who are less familiar.
Larry, just before you, just to clarify, these are construction costs?
Yes, sorry, these are not project costs.
Just so that's clear, thanks.
Yep, no, that's fair. Thanks for that update. Okay, there we go. Again, design, bid, build, we've finished a full set of drawings. We put that out for hard bid. We get all bids from interested general contractors, and we move forward with the lowest, most responsive bid, I think is how it's called in the state process. On the right side is the CMR, construction manager at risk procurement. That's where we are hiring a general contractor to assist with the project. Usually they come on board during design development, so they are assisting to both estimate the project as well as constructability issues, and we're hiring them based on qualifications. Then they put out the project to the subcontractors for bidding. So you get a level of bidding at the subcontractor level, and they are managing the risk. And what you see there is there's a little delta between the two that you typically see between whether you go straight to the street, as it's called, on the design, bid, build, or in the CMR procurement. Depending on the scheme, it's about a $2 to $4 million swing, or a little less than 5%. And this are based on numbers that our estimators are providing.
Just to add, though, this decision will be made during schematic design.
Yep.
Now, and that, in my opinion, unless people object, we should be keeping a conservative number, which is the CMR number for now, until we're able to make the decision about which approach to take for the project.
Yeah, I was just going to bring up the fact that we don't need to make a decision. Can be done at schematic design level is typically where it's done, although it can be pushed if it needs to be. And what you see there is the difference between the different schemes and the varying costs for the construction costs of each. In all cases, the new builds are essentially the same size for the different schemes, so 98,258 square feet for the 4-5 configuration, and 131,327 square feet for the grade 3 through 5 configuration. So it's essentially the same school on the 2 sites. There's a slight variation in the ad reno schemes. Typically, they're a little less efficient because we're dealing with some inefficiencies of the existing building, and so you'll see those a little higher in terms of square footage. But we would anticipate that number being fixed, whether it's on the Dale or Wheelock. And you can see all the various numbers there that go through. And as I mentioned, the costs are pretty comparable in terms of new construction. There's a little bit of discrepancy between the site, some of which is related to the Wheelock construction costs or Wheelock site reconfiguration. If you jump to the next one, Tina. So this again is presenting similar information, the base estimate. What we wanted to do was talk about 2 allowances that we have identified previously for everybody. As Tina mentioned, in discussions with the DPW in Medfield, the concern is that the main water pipe along Elm Street will need to be replaced if the school is relocated to that location. So we are suggesting an allowance of almost $1 million to cover that potential cost. Certainly would require further investigation and discussion with the DPW to see if that is indeed required, but at the moment we're carrying an allowance for that. The second allowance is the suggestion that due to some increase in traffic, we would be carrying some amount of money as a potential to install traffic improvements at the intersection of Elm Street. Right now, we don't have good traffic information. That's a lot based on the COVID-19 situation. Cars are just not out the way they used to be, and school is not in operation, has not been in operation, and so we don't have good traffic information as we ordinarily would, and so we're carrying an allowance here that may or may not prove to be necessary, but we wanted to include it, as Mike said, to be sure that we've protected the project with the dollar. So you can see the construction costs there along the bottom. And then multiplied up to the project cost, which is at a 1.25 multiplier, essentially what all in for the town of Medfield. And you can see it varies roughly around $72 million at the 4-5 scheme at Dale to 77, 76 for the 4-5 scheme at Wheelock. And the 3-5, 90, 89, and up higher on the Wheelock site up to $95 million. So again, presenting all the options there, and we can go through that if people have questions as we go through. Next slide.
I think we can go a little faster, Larry.
Yep, sorry.
We do want to spend some time on the site, and that's important in this conversation.
Yep.
Important too, and we'll sort those out.
Okay, sorry. We did have some pricing alternates. Again, I won't go through those, but for consideration in the next round of work and schematic. And then finally, the last slide shows you that impact of the Wheelock site improvements, which were about $2 million. So this is really the difference in the site costs for the two projects. So with that, turn it over to you, Lynn, to talk through the criteria matrix.
We can't hear you, Lynn.
Yeah, I was muted, sorry. Next page, please, Tina. Previously in the preliminary design program, we developed a site selection matrix that was a lot more simplified. It was a red light, green light, traffic light sort of scoring method. It took the criteria at face value, and we used it to sort of start to weed out some of the sites down to the Dale Street school site and the Wheelock school site. And we also used it to further look at the various options that we were moving toward when we were evaluating design options. But in this preferred schematic report phase, we realized that some of these criteria had a lot more impact than others. So the design team and the SBC looked at weighting each of the categories. As you can see here, the educational category had a weight of 30%, and also the town impact had a weight of 30%. The other site building and building had a weighting percentage of 15%. And logistics and security had 15%, 20%, 25%, sorry. So
Sorry about that.
That's got me confused there for a second. But under each of those categories, some pertinent questions were asked. And we looked at each of the design options and scored each of them based on the questions that were asked and how that design alternative best rated against the questions asked. All the SBC members, as well as the design team, filled out these evaluation matrix, and we compiled them all into the scoring that you see here. We took the average of all responses and indicated on this evaluation matrix. And as you can see,
It's difficult to see that, just so FYI for the public. It's just kind of.
I think maybe if you go to the next page, Tina, it
Yeah.
starts to, right. As you can see here, each category was rated on the 5 as best and 1 as poor. And you can see the colors. It went from best, better, good, fair, and poor for each of the categories. And each site alternative was rated. And based on that, you can visually see if it's mostly green, that's the best, to poor. And we have the site options across the top for the Dale Street School site and the Wheelock School site to the right. If you want to go to the last page. And as these all totaled up along the bottom, we had the base repair option coming in at the lowest at 225. And then we had, and the Dale Street School sites ranged from 225 to a high of 340. And the Wheelock School sites range from 420 to 425 for the options. So based on the criteria and how each of the site layouts and building layouts fit on the site and related back to the questions or the evaluation criteria developed, it was clear that the Wheelock School site was coming in at a higher rating than the school site, the options on the Dale Street School site.
Are there any questions? I know each of the SBC members have been asked to fill out this from their perspective. I did want to see if there was any feedback on this sort of averaged out criteria now that you're seeing it. Okay, not hearing any.
I think if we get into further discussions on each of the individual alternatives, we can come back to this and look at how each of them scored if we want. Okay, next. So how we got here, it's been a long process already. We started back in December of 2019, and we're coming up on to a year's worth of work on this project. We've had a number of open meetings and probably as many working group meetings as we had open meetings on this project. We had 43 open meetings from last year, this time until today. Next slide, Tina. As well as numerous attempts to reach out to the community to make sure that they were informed about the project. Next slide. So as we move forward, next slide, Tina. This is our timeline for this phase that we're in, which is the preferred schematic report phase. We are targeting submitting the preferred schematic report to MSBA on October 27th. We look to have a meeting with the MSBA to review our submission on or around November 18th, and in the hopes that the MSBA management will recommend approval to the board of directors for us to proceed into the schematic design phase of the project. Next slide. With the schematic design phase, there's about 7 months of work to fully develop the preferred option that we select to move forward. And we're currently targeting an approval by MSBA for June of 2021. This allows us to do one of two things: vote on the project at Springtown meeting or thereabout. This would be both of those the time frame of Springtown meeting as well as the June timeframe would be before the MSBA board vote. However, I will say that we will already know the firm numbers and we will already have had meetings with MSBA in advance of May 8th, I believe it is the date. So we'll know what the actual numbers will be that the MSBA board will vote on and approve at that point. We did leave ourselves a little bit of time in case we wanted to postpone a vote to the fall of 2021, but we do know that our timeline with MSBA ends by November 2021. So we have to be through with the schematic design process and with approval to fund the project with the town by November of 2021, or we get bumped out of the MSBA pipeline. Okay, next slide. Does anybody have any questions on the timeline or anything else?
None.
Okay, so I think now, are we wanting to open this up for public, first SBC comment on the design and sites and then public comment?
Yes, so SBC first. Does anyone have any questions on anything presented? You know, we do have some public that are eager to ask some questions and feedback, but I'd like to give you all the opportunity first. Doesn't sound like there is any. So in terms of how I'd like this to go logistically, for those listening and from the public, please type in your full name and your address into the Q&A section. I'm happy to have some people speak as opposed to just typing into the Q&A. But I am going to limit time just to make sure that we get to everybody. So, you know, please try to be brief and we'll try to answer the questions as you have them. All right, so first question comes from Baron Legere from 100 Pine Street. And let me just make sure, Baron, I'm going to promote you. Just give me 1 second. Let me find you here. I think we can hear you now, Baron. Can you hear us?
Hey, Mike. Thank you. Appreciate all the information. Very, very insightful, very helpful. Looking at the scoring, I was curious to learn a little bit more what the usage of the 1941 building would be in either scenario. And if there's been any thoughts around midterm usage, if WELAC was chosen, what to do with the premise, would that have any implication on the RAC Center or other usages down the road?
So that's a very good question. I'm not sure we have all the answers for you. And it would depend on which option is chosen. But if the ad reno scheme was chosen, then obviously it would be renovated as part of the new school. If the Dale Street School is chosen, maybe some partial demolition, I think mostly to the 1960s, 70s wing out back, not necessarily the front. And then on the wheelock options, it would essentially be mothballed for the time being while we determine what the future use of it would be. It could also be used as swing space for the schools. But the current options don't really have it being demolished in its entirety. And if it is abandoned, the town would then create another committee to decide the future disposition. It has been discussed as a potential future home for Park and Rec, as a way to keep costs down for that project. That's been floated in the past, but nothing's been decided. And that basically would be able to start once once it was determined that the Wheelock site was the selection, if that's the case. So that would be sort of after the vote next year.
Thank you.
All right, next up, looks like Jerry Potts. I believe it's 7 Curve Street, Jerry, but I'm gonna let you clarify that. Let me just get your permission here. Okay, you're on, Jerry.
It is 7 Curve Street. So I had, one question and then a comment on the town survey. I just wanted to validate that Dale Street from the survey results was the preferred location that came out from the public, correct?
So if you're talking about the poll that was done in May, yes, I believe it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 35% to 28%. I believe it was slightly preferred, yes. Okay,
and then just the quick follow-up on that is, I looked at it in the matrix, and I know it's always difficult. We're dealing with judgment, but I look at Elm Street right now, and I look at that Wheelock area and adding 500 plus students. I was just curious within the matrix on why Wheelock is viewed as better from a traffic standpoint, adding 500 plus more students, and, just already it's a small street where you have to replace, a sewer line. It seems to me that promoting the downtown, that fits with what the master plan found, which is keep open space, keep recreation, and try to do things to promote the downtown. So I just was wondering if there's any factor, in looking at the results that have come from the townwide master plan and also incorporating those as sort of an emphasis in the decision process. So thanks for letting me talk.
No problem. I can't speak for how everybody scored theirs. I don't have my scoring sheet in front of me, but what I can say is in terms of open space, both the Dale Street project and the Wheelock project are creating new buildings on open space. So to me, they're both the same in that regard. They're just in different locations. The Wheelock site is more remote. That is true, but I personally don't believe it's fully disconnected from downtown, and is only, I believe, an 8 or 10 minute difference from walking downtown. And it's fully sidewalked. I know there's parts of Elm Street once you get past the school that don't have sidewalks, but there's sidewalks from Elm Street that lead all the way into downtown, so it's perfectly walkable from my perspective. So, I know some may disagree with me on that, but I don't know if anybody else on the committee had any thoughts or comments for Jerry.
I could just say, hi, Jerry, how are you doing? I could say that, when I was thinking about how we were scoring this too, if we still built a new building and we saved part of the 1941 building that might get turned into something else, or taking what would have been a two-use property to a three-use property now, which is going to add extra complications as well as a larger school. So, the Dale Street footprint would be shadowed over what, with the new building to what it is, whether it's 4-5 or 3-4-5. But now even at 4-5, that is going to be a very large place. I feel like the congestion would be astronomical there. Actually, my kind of hope is that we would reclaim space in the downtown area, for open space closer to downtown that is walkable to more folks in that area. So, and I do see someone made a comment about rec opportunities as well that could be very easily accessible right in the center of town. At least that's what I hope, along with a nice campus building system, for multiple grades on the same campus, for learners. So that's kind of how my thinking has been throughout this process.
And Mike, this is Mike Marcucci. Just quickly on that, I think, so sort of the traffic and congestion point, I was trying to pull up my matrix to make sure that what I'm going to say is consistent with what I actually put into the form, but it should be, because I don't think I've changed my mind. I think my sense of it is somewhat similar to Leo's, and that as I looked at the two different sites and the streets around the two of them, that obviously there's a net increase of however many additional, mostly teachers' cars, because I think the number of school buses going to the Wheelock area is going to be roughly the same. I mean, Jeff or NMA can give the details on that, but I think it's
All
going to
the
be
buses,
same number of
go to all the
buses.
schools. Yeah.
Yeah, they're already going there anyway, so that's not, you know, a net increase. Most of the kids are on buses, and the Dale site, as it is very congested. You know, there's, for events or otherwise, there's people parked all along the street, on Adams Street, on the sidewalk, and the site overall is more congested. It's just smaller, and so either way, you're putting the same number of kids in two different locations, one of which is, you know, twice the size of the other. So I was thinking about a traffic, not only whatever net increase you're going to have on Elm Street, but also some relief that you would have with a less, almost certainly whatever use is made of the Dale Street school is going to be a less intensive usage, certainly from, you know, 7:30 to 3 o'clock during the school year. And to speak briefly to Barron's point as well, I think that the Park and Rec has been a candidate for that. And then going back even further, when this was originally under discussion, sort of the old kind of Mike Sullivan view was that, you know, if you built the new Wheelock school, the new school over at Wheelock, that the part of that Dale Street site would be sort of an ideal senior housing location that would fit within the grant from Hannah Adams Pfaff to be used for sort of a public and municipal purpose. So again, that would have to be part of ongoing discussions afterwards. But I think just in looking at the sites, it was the size and the congestion comparing the two of them. And it felt to me, in looking at it, that given the depth and the size and the additional parking that would be added to the Wheelock site, you would have you'd have basically everybody parking off the street, everybody parking on the parking lot, and you wouldn't have competition for, you know, as much competition as people try to park to go to other things in the downtown. So that I think the question was mostly about traffic and congestion, and I think that's where I came out in why I rated the traffic and congestion the way that I did.
Anybody else in the committee? And if not, we'll move to the next question.
Yeah, I just want to mention, you know, thank you, Jerry. You know, the survey results, he pointed that out, that 37% or so voted for, or voted for Dale. But I just want to point out that roughly 25% voted for the Wheelock, 22% said they did not have enough information, and close to 15% said they had no preference. So it wasn't a clear winner, so to speak. And I think now that we've moved deeper into this project, there's more information. And I think I just wanted to point that out. So thank you. Mike, can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I was muted myself. We have Renee Howley from 3 Harding Street. And Renee, you should be on now. Can you hear us? Renee, you need to unmute first. Okay, we're gonna hold off on Renee, and we'll jump to the next one. Is Robert Herbstruber from 6 Cross Street. So bear with me here. Where is it? Scrolling through here. Why can't I find it? Here it is.
Hello.
Hey, Bob.
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
I'm good. You are on.
Thank you. I'm actually at 7 Cross Street, just for the record.
Okay. Did I thought I said 7.
You said 6, but I'm okay. Jerry and I share a
apologies.
number. No, no worries. So I have 2 or 3 comments, and then just 1 or 2 questions. It was kind of eye-opening to see the costs in the $1.5 million range for the water main and the traffic light. As someone who lives south of 109, the South Street, Pound Street is a mess in the morning. It's really an absolute mess. And it pushes a lot of traffic off of South Street onto the local side roads. Streets that are just not handled or are built to handle people rushing to work and rushing here and rushing there. And my biggest concern is that we don't have good infrastructure on these side roads where you're going to put the second school down at Wheelock. You're going to push more and more and more traffic onto these small secondary curvy roads with narrow bridges. Buses can't even get over the bridge at Elm Street. You're going to create, I know everyone's talking just about Elm Street. You just do not have the Dale Street double yellow, single yellow line, double line on North Street. You don't have the large infrastructure in terms of traffic. I mean, I do understand the parking and the fact that it's minimal at Dale Street right now, but the layouts seem like it adds a substantial amount of parking in those plans. I was really quickly assessing my other concern is actually the +1 on our building stock. I am a personal fan of the renovate and add on plan, just because I don't think we need another building at this time on our building stock. I think that just the overall cost, we would basically be getting a refurbishment of Dale with a contribution from the state, as opposed to it's us necessarily for probably having to redo Dale for our purposes, mostly on our dime. So I'm a big fan of let's get the state to help pay for this if we in fact are going to use that building. If not, let's demolish it. And I live in this area. I live in Wheelock, and I heard some comments like, oh, Dale Street will be the same distance from downtown as Wheelock. There is no way a walk from Dale Street to downtown Medfield, which generally starts at about the public safety building, is the same distance as walking from Wheelock or, that area up to the middle of town. And I also heard a comment about, oh, it's just teachers and there won't be any more buses. I don't know how you add 500 students down there and not have parent drop-offs and parent pickups and parent activities and all sorts of things that go on in association with the school so again, I've heard some kind of weird comments about, oh, it will just be the same, when I really don't believe it will be the same. Finally, I just want to say that, the open space down behind Wheelock in that area is very heavily used. And you're talking about getting rid of 50% or a little over 50% of the space down there, the open space behind Wheelock. That is not just used for teams and recreation. There are days when the parking lot is filled, not because of soccer or lacrosse or whatever. It's a good number of people just on the south side of the town. That's our open space land right there. As the north side of the town has Hospital Hill and those nice big open areas, the south side of town has Wheelock and the fields behind and the HomeQuest land and things of that nature. So although I do hear the arguments for Wheelock, I just don't see this like rating 1 is a 1 and 1 is a 5. Like I saw the expansion potential as one of the criteria that blipped by. If we build at Dale, we still have tons of expansion potential down off of the Wheelock School in the future. Like I just don't see how that makes it a 1 in the long term. The construction impact, that's a short-term impact. That's not a thing which goes on for 5 years, or I hope the school will not be being built for 5 years. So I looked at some of those and I kind of questioned, really, are those really valid, kinds of things to add to a survey like this, because they are temporary, or again, if you build at Dale, you still have tons of land in other places, to build off the back of Wheelock or wherever. Again, so I see some definite pluses to both of the sites. But I think the traffic thing is being dismissed as, oh, it'll be great at Wheelock and it'll be cruddy at Dale. And I just don't see it. We have a known commodity at Dale. And again, yeah, I've seen cars park on the sides of the roads and things like that. And it's because it's a 1941 building with really bad planning. So again, I've seen the new layouts and the layouts with parking and the layouts with, added stuff to get those cars off the road. We have a known commodity at Dale. We have a completely known commodity. It's 2 grades. It's a certain number of students. These are the activities that are run there. And again, we don't know what will happen with moving it down to Wheelock. It's more of an estimate. It's more of a guess. It's more of a, well, these are what we think might happen. And really, again, for me, having the +1 building of what do we do with Dale, I think is a headache that we're not going to want. And if anyone thinks that the economic situation is just going to magically rectify itself in the next year or 2 years, I think we have a long road of lots of bad economy coming down our heads, and we're going to have an old building that we need to do something. We need to do something with. So again, although I don't think any option's a bad option, I think at this point we should go with the devil that we know, which is the Dale Street site, and instead of the devil that we don't, which is the Wheelock site.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. Yep.
I'm not exactly sure there was a question there, but I do want to address a couple of things that you said.
Okay.
I am a South Sider, as you referred to it, and I have my wife walks the dog around those conservation lands every day. So
I do see her.
I am very familiar with them. And you mentioned something about losing 50% of that land to this building, and that
not the Homecrest land, but the actual people hang out.
Wheelock site.
Generally on the Wheelock site.
So I think your percentages are a little exaggerated, but it's really just the fields behind the Wheelock school, not the main soccer fields.
No, I understand that.
Fields would be replicated. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear to everybody that we're not taking half of the entire site for this building.
So you said there'll be other fields put in, correct?
Right.
Or how is that going to be?
Correct.
Okay, because as you get behind the Wheelock fields, it gets very narrow as the railroad tracks come directly up to the road at one point. So I'm just not sure how that's. I mean, if you put a building in of that size, you're losing at least half of all that space behind the existing Wheelock building. Yeah, I know the soccer fields are untouchable. I'm talking about the space behind the Wheelock building. If you're planning on putting a brand new school back there, I don't see how that land doesn't become 50% less if you're putting a building back there.
Well, I'm happy to walk you through the site plan at some point, but it is not to that level.
Okay. I mean, it's all open now, and you're putting a building plus new roads, plus new parking lots, plus new. Again, I don't see how you don't lose a very large portion of that land on that site with all that paving and all that building. I don't know how you take a site like that and you drop a building of that size back there and say, oh, it's going to be great. It's going to be lots of open space.
I mean, this seems like this is a measurable amount and not one that sort of has to be just what people feel like from looking at it. So why don't we ask, while we're answering the other questions,
Okay.
Larry or somebody from Aero Street, they've measured this, and tell us how big the building is, tell us how big the stuff is. And then if you want to go look at the pictures as well, you can see, I take your point on that, Rob, but this is sort of, it's a factual question as to how
Yeah.
much land is going to be used. And so you can say it's 50, Mike can say it's 25, but there's an answer in the design as to what it's going to be. And we should probably go with what the actual answer in the design is instead of just sort of somebody's guesstimate, either yours or Quinlan's.
Yeah, I agree. It just, again, I got to see a quick peek at the picture. And again, there's lots of new parking lots. There's lots of new building. There's lots of new development in general down there. So, you know, not as bad.
It's fine. We can clarify it. I don't want to belabor this topic on speculation, but we're happy to clarify that and show the differences. And you know, maybe Larry and his team can look at that real quick while we move on. So I'm gonna we'll come back to you, Bob, and see if we have an answer by the end. Next up, so Renee seemed to say that she didn't want to speak, but she did want her question. So Renee Howley's question from 3 Harding Street was, I'm very curious why an equivalent school on Dale Street site scored so low as compared to Wheelock Community, for example. How would a centrally located facility score lower than 1 mile away from the center? I think this goes, community use isn't just about downtown, at least in my opinion. I don't believe that Wheelock site is that remote, number 2. And actually, I think the community can utilize that site fairly well, not just what they already do in terms of the soccer fields, but you know, Medfield youth basketball, I know, would certainly look to use that site on the weekends in conjunction with the building. So I know that would be beneficial as well. But again, I don't have my, I should call up my scoring sheet just to see how I scored it. But
well, Mike, I mean, the questions in that category, it was, you know, how well does the alternative fit the scale of the site and surrounding context? How well does the alternative benefit the community, such as community space, athletic fields, after school programming? How well does the alternative support sports and other after hours events or usage? So that was what the questions are in the community impact. And I know it's hard to see. This is not the easiest thing to, it wasn't that easy to look at it when I just had it up on my screen.
Does anybody else want to chime in on how they decided to rank the projects from a community perspective?
So I can say a little bit more about that, Mike, and just from my perspective. And I, you know, I because I think this goes to the proximity to downtown, and I agree with Bob. I don't think there's a bad alternative here. I think if the MSBA were to come to the town and say, you have to pick one or the other, I don't think any of us should be, you know, laying down on 109 to prevent the trains from coming in. I mean, I think the town's going to be fine. The kids are going to be educated, and people are going to be happy to live here wherever the school ends up. But we still want to make the best decision. I think in terms of proximity to the downtown, that's obviously, you know, everyone's mileage may vary on that, right? And I think Mike Quinlan said it's about an 8 to 10 minute difference in walk, maybe a little less if you're a faster walker, a little, you know, I don't know if any 4th and 5th grade legs walked that to measure it out at 4th and 5th grade speed. But, you know, everyone's mileage is going to vary as to whether they think a 4th and 5th grader can walk from Wheelock to the downtown. Like, from my perspective, you know, yes, obviously I let my kids do that. Other people might not. And so if you're in the camp of you wouldn't let your kids do that, obviously, to Bob's point, that would add more cars on top of if people are being picked up and driven around. I do think in having looked at a lot of traffic studies and had a lot of these discussions in development, I think one thing to keep in mind is we all tend to overestimate the impact of what is a relatively small number of cars in the grand scheme of things. And so when we were looking at that South Street intersection in the past, you know, there's something like 10,000 cars or something that come through the center of Medfield at some point, you know, during a rush hour. And so there's only so much impact, whatever you think the number is, whether you think it's 100 more cars or 150 more cars, whatever it is, it only has so much impact. And I think if we were to do a traffic study and it would come back and say, look, it's going to absolutely trash that neighborhood, then we'd have the opportunity to pull back from this and do something different. So I think as I